Hello there. Fresh from Asus HQ, let me introduce you to actually something pretty special. This is the Asus Zenbook A14, the first in this A series, where the A definitely does not stand for Air, because that would be much too close to a certain fruit-based rival, but it would be appropriate because this is, in fact, Asus's lightest Zenbook ever. And it's very nice. Depending on the model, we're talking just 899 grams, which is about a third less than the smaller MacBook Air 13. So not only is it their lightest Zenbook ever, but this is also the longest lasting Zenbook they've ever made. It's also the first Snapdragon-powered Zenbook. It's their first all-cerulean laptop, which we'll talk more about later on, but basically means it's incredibly light and also pretty tough. And I think the best part actually is the fact that this is probably a good deal cheaper than you might expect. In fact, and apparently this is just a coincidence, but the starting price of this is the same as the weight on that lightest model, 899 grams, $899. So let me give you a bit of a walkthrough of this new Asus Zenbook A14. What I like, a couple of things I don't like so much, but also a big thank you to Asus for sending this out for me to have a play with, because there are only a handful of these in the world right now, which means this is, yes, a pre-release sample, which means I can't give you full benchmarks, although I'm going to try and sneak in a cheeky battery test, as long as no one tells on me. But before we talk about anything else, and even before you pick this up, the very first thing I noticed is how smooth, how nice this hinge is. I absolutely love it. I know it's not the easiest thing to get excited about, but I've used a lot of laptops in my time, and I honestly think this might be my favorite hinge. The fact that you can just open it really easily with one finger, there's just the right amount of resistance to it, but it also feels premium. I don't know, I didn't think I'd like a hinge this much. Very satisfying. There's also minimal screen wobble. There is a little bit of flex if you sort of twist the screen, and also if you press quite firmly actually into the keyboard. It's not bad at all, but there is a little bit of flex there. And we do have this plastic bezel around the screen, which, while thin, isn't as sexy as a edge-to-edge glass panel that you might get on their Zenbook S14 or 16. But what really makes this A14 stand out, as I'm just chucking it around, as you can probably guess, is the weight. As I say, lightest Zenbook they've ever made, from as little as 899 grams, although I believe that particular model is only available in China, maybe a couple of other regions in Asia, and also has the smaller battery capacity. This one here has the bigger 70 watt-hour battery, as opposed to 50. We've also got an OLED screen. It's got the entry-level model Snapdragon X chip. They're all under a kilogram, apparently, regardless of the spec you go for. So, 974 grams. Let me compare that to the latest MacBook Air 13, which of course is a 13-inch screen as opposed to 14, 975, 1223. That's about 250 grams lighter. This could be like the ultimate travel companion. It really is impressively light. Of course, other laptops have done that as well, from Huawei and LG, but what Asus has done is they've taken this magnesium aluminium chassis and put it through a ceramization process. Here's an actual video of what that looks like, which changes the chemical structure, making it tougher, harder, more scratch, more smudge resistant. It's actually pretty amazing. You get the benefit of being super lightweight, but it doesn't feel too cheap or plasticky. And of course, Asus's marketing department is very pleased with themselves for coming up with cerulean. And it comes in two colors, Iceland Grey, which I have here, and also the one that I actually prefer, the Zabriskie Beige, which has almost like a gold hint to it. Both very smart, but if I was going to buy one, I would go for the beige. They've also made the keycaps bigger, so typing's more comfortable, and they've added a smudge-resistant coating to it. We have this huge touchpad. They could literally not squeeze a bigger one in here, which comes with these smart gestures. You can adjust the volume on the left-hand side, the brightness on the right side. In terms of I/O, we've got two USB 4 ports. These are full-fat USB 4, either of which you can use with the charger, a HDMI 2.1 port, 3.5mm headphone jack, and on the other side, a single USB 3.2 Type A. No microSD or SD card reader, unfortunately, but for the size of this, not a bad range of ports. And up top here, we have their 1080p AI webcam, and also with the IR sensor, we get 3D face unlocking through Windows Hello. So this is being recorded on the A14's 1080p webcam. The quality is okay. Let me just sort of move you around a little bit, change up the lighting. What we do have though, because this is a Copilot Plus enabled PC with that Snapdragon chip, I can turn on the automatic framing, the portrait light, eye contact, so always looks like I'm looking at the camera as I'm swearing at you, apologies for that, background effects so I can blur, and all these effects are being run on the NPU rather than the CPU or the GPU, which is much more efficient for the battery. So you can have all this stuff in your Teams and your Zoom meeting and it won't destroy your battery. There's no fingerprint reader. For biometrics, you have to rely on the face unlocking, and as I say, the webcam quality is a bit average. Aside from that though, no real complaints. Really comfortable keyboard and touchpad, fully backlit.
Captain America, you don't even know what this is.
Now, front and center is this 14-inch screen. Full HD, well, technically 1920 by 1200 because this is a taller 16 by 10 aspect ratio, thumbs up for that. And the resolution is fine for a 14-inch laptop. Certainly a Quad HD or high-res option would have been nice, but then you're also going to compromise on battery life and also make it more expensive. It's fine for this size, but certainly it's not the sharpest out there. Now, the A14 comes in both IPS and OLED flavors, and also there are some differences in brightness between the IPS and the OLED. The IPS tops out at a pretty average 400 nits, and also because it's a single backlight, it can't boost, so you're not really getting any improvement in HDR. The OLED screen, which I have here, which I would recommend if you can, is also 400 nits in SDR, but can boost to about 550 nits with HDR content. Brightness is kind of average, and the other issue, maybe even the bigger issue, is that all variants of the A14 have a 60 Hz refresh rate. There is no option for a higher 120 Hz refresh. I would have taken 90, to be honest. You can even appreciate that difference. You could reasonably argue that, well, Tom, the MacBook Air has a 60 Hz screen and no one really cares about that, but we've kind of come to expect a bit more from the Windows rivals, particularly from Asus. Don't get me wrong, this OLED screen is still very nice to use, but 400 nits SDR, 60 Hz, it's not ideal. Although if you do want a higher resolution 120Hz OLED screen that's also not powered by Snapdragon, then definitely have a look at the Zenbook S series, like the S14. But let's talk about what's on the inside, and I can tell you right now it's not Intel inside for this guy. This is Asus's first Snapdragon-powered Zenbook. We have had Snapdragon VivoBooks, but this is the first Zenbook, and it's using Qualcomm Snapdragon's brand new and most affordable Snapdragon X chip. So in the base model, which I have here, this is the Snapdragon X 126-100 chip with integrated graphics and NPU, of course. All Snapdragon processors have the same 45 TOPS NPU, which means regardless of which one you go for, you get all the Windows Copilot Plus features. So the entry-level model from around $900-ish will come with the 8-core Snapdragon X, and then at the top end for around $1,500, you've got the 12-core X Elite chip, with a couple of 10 and 12-core X Plus models in between. So 4 different processor options at different price points, with either 16 or 32 gigs of RAM, and I've got 32 gigs in this guy, which I would love to demonstrate for you, but unfortunately, as I say, this is a pre-release model, so I can't actually run performance benchmarks. Although I am very excited to test this, because if this new 8-core Snapdragon X chip isn't that far behind the X Plus and X Elite, for a lot of people, a more affordable Snapdragon-powered laptop could be the sweet spot. Quick recap though, if you have been living under a rock for the last 9 months or so, but last summer, Qualcomm unveiled the Snapdragon X series of chips for thin and light laptops, giving Intel and AMD and Apple some proper competition, and on the whole, they were very good. Good performance, excellent battery life and efficiency. They were the first with a powerful enough NPU to give us the Windows Copilot Plus features. However, the downside of these Snapdragon chips is that they are built on ARM architecture rather than x86, the more traditional Intel AMD architecture, which means not all apps ran, and if they did, they wouldn't necessarily run as well if they weren't as optimized. Now, the good news is we've had over 6 months with these chips now, and with new drivers being released and more apps being optimized by the developers for this architecture, things have got a lot better. What I would say if you are considering a Snapdragon laptop such as this, if you're using a particular or very niche piece of software or app, just check that it will run on Snapdragon first before you run out and buy one, because otherwise it's absolutely lovely to use. It runs cool, it's quiet, and even this new entry-level model feels snappy, despite the 60Hz screen, and the dual fan cooling system means it can run at the chip's full 45 watts if it needs to. The best part though, by far, is the battery life. I was told not to run any benchmarks, but hopefully they'll let me keep this in the video, but I put this up against the MacBook Air 13 with M3 and also its higher-end cousin, shall we say, the Zenbook S14 with a top-spec Intel Core Ultra Series 2, all set to 150 nits and running in their respective efficiency modes, streaming YouTube, and then at just under 13 hours, the S14 and the MacBook Air drop out with just 6 minutes between them. But the A14 just keeps going. It still has about 40% left in the tank when the other two have run out of juice, and in fact at the 15-hour mark, because I literally had to stop and start shooting this video, it still had 30% left. Of course, your mileage may vary, and also remember this is a pre-release, non-final version of the laptop, so it could even get better than that. And really, just to sum up this whole laptop, for under a kilogram, for under £1,000, and giving you over 20 hours of battery life, this is shaping up to be the ultimate thin and light laptop. Stay tuned for a full review though, and if you do fancy checking this out, I will leave a link in the description below. As I say, my recommendation would be the beige, also with the OLED screen, but we'll have to see how the Snapdragon X chip compares with the X Plus and X Elite. The screen hardware does let it down a little bit, I would say, but this is still very much worth considering. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know what you make of this in the comments below, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.